And welcome to the question and answer portion. And so any question is encouraged, and particularly if you are new, it's really helpful, I think, to all of us to hear questions from people who are new, because I think most of us find it's important to revisit things that we may be taking for granted. And but any subject is okay, and especially if you have questions about practice. And since it's just me today, I'll remind you that I'm not exactly a Dharma teacher. So if you have questions about the higher bodhisattva bunis, I may defer those questions.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes,
I had something arise while I was sitting here, and it was about forgiveness. And, in the teachings that I've been given, wasn't a big Dharma talk or anything about forgiveness, and I'm just wondering, where does that fit in with everything?
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great question. And it's true, you don't hear a lot of Dharma talks about forgiveness. But if you really start to pay attention to your life, in particular if you try to take responsibility for your own actions, and the more you open yourself to your experience, I think the more relevant forgiveness becomes. And I've wondered also myself, why isn't there more about forgiveness? And one of my hypotheses is that for a lot of the teachings around emptiness and the three spheres focus really on the root of the issue, which is that there's not an I or an other, at least in the way that we normally think about them. And I thought, well, maybe since that is their focus, maybe talking about forgiveness doesn't make as much sense, but it always has made sense to me. And I think that where it comes up the most for me is really in the practice of kindness and not harming people. And So there's an element of forgiveness if you think that you've harmed someone. Then how do you relate to that, and how do you forgive yourself? And then if you think about somebody who's harmed you, how do you work with that, and where do you encounter it? And I think the one way that you can work with it is around forgiveness. Is your question more about practice, or more about where does it fit in?
Maybe both.
I have a little let's see if I can lay my hands on it. Looks like you got bumped out of my book. That's too bad. I think that the gist of the quote, which was from Robert Enright, who's a psychologist, who bless his heart, the focus of his psychology research and teaching is working with the Protestant and Catholic communities in Northern Ireland. And interestingly, the focus of his work is with the kiddos in those communities. And so he teaches a whole class about forgiveness. And the way I know about it, actually, I should share the best thing that I've encountered on forgiveness is a movie that was made called The Power of Forgiveness. And my experience of that movie is it's impossible to watch it without forgiving someone for something. It's extremely well done and it has segments on Amish grace, which was how the Amish dealt with the school. There was a gunman who shot a bunch of first graders and kindergartners in the Amish community. It has Thich Nhat Hanh is in it. It has a bunch of the family members who had family members who were killed in 9/11, and it's really beautiful. And Enright's quote was about the sort of paradoxical thing, which we tend to think that in order to be forgiven, the person who has caused harm needs to do something. They need to acknowledge the harm that was caused, or make amends, or usually there's some kind of formula that we have in mind that we need in order to forgive. But he makes the point that when we forgive someone, it's actually us that experiences the benefit. And he said, but you can't do it for that. You can't do it that way. You can't say, okay, I'm going to do this for myself so that I'll feel better. It doesn't work like that. So maybe it's more of a fruit than a practice. And the only practice that was really described in the movie was developed by a psychologist who also shared that, well, in his career, his elderly mother was killed by a home invader, really for no reason. And so in the course of finding his way through this, he developed an approach to forgiveness that involved, I think he called it two chairs. And the two chairs practice, in one, first you take your own seat, and you talk to the person who's harmed you or harmed somebody else that you care about. And you describe your experience and tell them how you feel. And then, as you might guess, the next thing is to sit in the other chair and imagine that you're that person. And what would they say? And so I suppose that could be made into a practice for part of your meditation. Something to try.
Yeah, they call that Gestalt. Gestalt.
Yeah, so it even has a name.
Yeah, yeah.
My sense is that forgiveness is a fruit of practice rather than something that you can do. And the practice itself involves really trying to look more deeply into the feelings that are arising. And then what it becomes is well, there's lots of Buddhist practices for looking into and working with your own emotions. Then it's sort of back on more familiar ground. And I think the other way that we get caught up is in wanting there to be some change in the world or change in the other person or something that it may be forthcoming, but it may not be. And particularly when that change in the world that you may be looking for is really out of your control, maybe that's the best time to try to bring it into your own practice and to work with it. Yeah, Linda.
I was just going to say that thinking about Buddhist teachings around forgiveness, what came to mind for me was the Lojong slogan, be grateful to everyone. This is a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there may be some there may be some work to do before one feels grateful.
It's a good aspiration, though.
Yes.
What is the slogan?
The slogan is be grateful to everyone. Yeah, that's a good Buddhist answer to forgiveness. A very good Zen answer to it.
Gary?
Yes, Linda.
So you can say Linda for anybody. When I first, within the first months of coming to KCC, I was in a situation where, in a very sticky and complicated and confusing and challenging situation, and I felt really strongly that one person was behaving very badly in this situation and harming some people and something that I really cared deeply about. And I had an interview with Julia, and never a word was said about forgiveness, actually, but she very skillfully led me around to being boxed in by the fundamental view that all beings have bodhicitta, and that no matter how they're behaving, it's because of their confusion and obscurations. And that I just was caught with something that eventually really became, first of all, seeing my part in the whole mess, and secondly, not necessarily articulating it as forgiveness for this person, but seeing him completely differently and being able to remain in interface with him and feel compassion for him instead of fury with him. And nobody ever said anything about forgiveness, but it felt like what occurred in me might be named forgiveness in other ways of thinking about things.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's an element of forgiveness which is seeing things clearly and also letting go. And well, one could say almost all the practices have those as their basis. Certainly the calm abiding practice is a practice of letting go. Yeah, thank you, Linda.
I might have a question, or it might not be a question.
Go ahead, Laura.
So I was thinking about how, like, the first time I went to a Buddhist center was, I was like 20 or something. It was a Zen center, and I didn't. There were some things I liked about it, but I didn't stay. And I think one of the things that was hard for me was that the problem with not having duality is, for me at that time, one of the problems with it was that then there wasn't really I couldn't figure out how love works in that context. Like, Christianity has God who loves you, and that was problematic. Christianity's God, because he also could not love you. Like, he was capable of being like, he was capable of withdrawing that love. But I liked that. I mean, there was something about that felt true to me, and I just couldn't figure out how to work it out with Buddhism. Like, if all of these feelings are, all of the words we have are words to describe conditions of, like being humans, being whatever manifests like this, and this manifestation is just an illusion. But then, what about the sense that I had, like, but this thing feels like an abiding thing, even if it's not, like, even if this word is just a word for it. So I sort of wandered off, and then I liked the Sufis for a while, or like the Sufi mystical poetry, because then God is, the lover, and that felt like, maybe that could be a thing that feels like a thing that I could do. And then I also like this one translation of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, where God is, well, I don't even know if this is what this man is saying, this is what I heard him saying, that God is like this humming sound, the sound of Om, and that is sort of love, like that's the feeling of love. And so when you're, like, when you can, that piece of you, so like maybe the goal is to sort of be absorbed into that, like, humming love God, or, So, and that felt like, okay, I think I could maybe try doing that. That's a thing I could maybe be up for. And I still am not 100% sure. I mean, maybe I kind of feel like maybe with Buddha, like maybe it's just a problem of words. And because with this practice, the trouble is, like, for me, is the bridge. Like, I want to have a thing I'm bridging to. And nothing is hard to bridge to.
Yes.
So, is that a question? It doesn't seem like one, but it is on some
It made perfect sense to me, so who knows what I heard then. Probably should be suspicious of that. So part of your question is so fundamental to the Buddhist path that the Buddhist teaching about it is literally called the Heart Sutra. And I think that what you said is true. Words are kind of a barrier here, because the truth that would really satisfy you is not expressible in words. And so even the words of the, if you read the Heart Sutra, you'll probably say, wow, that's, and now I'm even more confused. And so one of the confusions is around emptiness, and the idea is that things are empty or maybe not real, or that I'm not real, or that my experience is not real. And that's not quite what emptiness is pointing at. I think your experience that your experience that you have a self is real, and your experience that there are others that you interact with is also real. What emptiness says, though, is that they aren't real in the way that they're a thing that exists in that way, and that there's something there. And there's a huge difference between hearing that and sort of cognitively understanding it and actually experiencing the world in which that is true. There's a big, big, big difference. And it sounds like there's a part of you which is which is love. And that was one of the insights that the Buddha contributed. After very careful examination, his conclusion was that our fundamental nature is these four immeasurable things: loving kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity. And so the practice of calm abiding, you're right, it is not, well, let me see. It is a bridge, but I think that's it is exactly a bridge, and I think we haven't maybe articulated for you what's it a bridge to. But I think one of the practices that may be beneficial for you, or something that you might investigate and try, would be the practice of immeasurable loving kindness. And there's we don't usually give those instructions in Sunday, but they're not. They're not difficult, and I'll just briefly give a basic one, just, or a place to start. And it doesn't work for everybody, but often the way that the practice is taught to start with is that one practices loving kindness for oneself. And probably the simplest way to do this is to imagine someone. But why don't we do the practice together, just briefly? Is that let's just do it. So take a moment to arrive here into your body and visualize in front of you someone that you love. Imagine them sitting before you, and it could be anyone. If you're having trouble coming up with a person, it's fine to have an animal. Somebody or something that you feel love for, that you deeply care about, that you want to be someone or something that you want to be happy. And imagine the expression of that love that's in your heart, radiating out as clear white light from the center of your chest and entering into that person. And as the light enters them, imagine that they are filled with that love. That any sadness or suffering or confusion is relieved. And that they experience nothing but compassion and love and joy. And imagine that they, filled with love, now look at you and imagining from the center of their chest, white light coming out and bathing you. And imagine yourself feeling suffused with that light, and feel what it feels like to be loved by another person. So that's sort of the first step. Loving kindness practice of the four measurables. Yes, Sally?
If someone wanted to know the other steps of that practice, where would you recommend looking?
Oh, let me see. Well, I learned them from Alan Wallace. And the great thing about Alan Wallace is everything that he says eventually makes it into publication. And Savitra, do you know if we have, do we have his book on the four immeasurables in stock? We often do.
The little blue one to the right, I think the second shelf down,
Do we have that one, Diana?
the 5 copies.
We have 5 copies, yeah. Yeah.
Just inventory.
Yeah. So that would be one place. And then if you look on, if you look online, at unfetteredmind.org, which is Ken MacLeod's website. He also has teachings on the four measurables. He has both sort of podcast recordings and some Q&A about them. I think he still has his four measurables retreat recorded there, which I once did a personal retreat on the four measurables, and I used that as the resource. I would listen to him, and he really gets into the practice of it and actually uses a slogan approach that he came up with. And I think I have some of the slogans actually. I may have modified them a little bit from his, because I think when he first did this, he was coming up with them, and I think he hadn't quite got the language just right. But so the slogans for working, or the phrases, and what Kin does is he has you just repeat these to yourself over and over and over again, which is a powerful practice. It seems too easy, but don't write it off. So here are the slogans that I may have edited for myself for loving kindness. May I be happy, well, and at peace. May I open to everything that arises. May I experience the world wishing me happiness and peace. May I appreciate things just as they are. That last one sounds like be grateful to everyone too, doesn't it? Yeah. So may I be happy, well, and at peace. May I open to everything that arises. May I experience the world wishing me happiness and peace. And may I appreciate things just as they are.
In the
Yes.
Theravadan tradition, they call it the metta practice.
Yes, exactly.
And there's a book by Sharon Salzberg that's loving kindness practice. And if you go online, probably YouTube has very similar how they carry that out.
Yes.
Very similar ways.
Yes, thank you. So let's dedicate the merit. Thank you.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.